This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Someone recently said to me, I remember as a youngster sitting with my mom as she cried about her life, her job, her marriage, her world. She would tell me things that no child should hear. Things I didn't understand, it just made me feel bad. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism Podcast. I'm your host, Renee Swanson. I am not a therapist, and you are not a victim. Things like how unhappy she was, and how she wished she'd made different life choices, how she wished that things were different. Now, I didn't know how to handle this. I didn't know how to process this stuff, but I felt responsible for making her feel better. Have you ever found yourself parenting the parent? This episode today is about exploring the complexities of covert narcissism and the journey toward healing. Today's episode is dedicated to adult children of covert narcissistic parents. Your experiences matter, and together we will unpack these dynamics, share stories, and discuss how to move forward. Today we're diving into the topic of parentification. Now, this term might sound clinical, and it describes a deeply emotional and often invisible experience. Parentification occurs when a child is parenting the parent. The child is forced to take on the role of the parent, either emotionally or even physically, to meet the needs of their caregivers, the parent. And when a parent is a covert narcissistic individual, parentification is absolutely one of the dynamics that plays out in that home. Many adult children of covert narcissists report feeling like they had to take on adult responsibilities at a really young age. Maybe they became the emotional support system for the parent, or they had to be their scheduler, to make sure that they remembered where they were supposed to be, kind of like being their calendar or their alarm clock to get them up in the morning. They might be an emotional monitor to them, monitoring their moods, working to set up the environment in a positive direction, creating workarounds to keep them from getting angry, tap dancing around their moods. This is not a role that a child should be playing to their parent. And many of these adult children have expressed things to me such as, I had to grow up too fast, or I carried responsibilities that were beyond my years. So what is parentification? This is the process where children assume adult responsibilities, often due to the caregiver's lack of parental responsibility. So this is an emotional absence, a physical absence, or even, due to neglect. And it can take two main forms. It can take what they call instrumental parentification, which is when a child takes on the practical caregiving roles, such as cooking or cleaning and managing the household task. Now, this is different than doing chores. Chores are helping. This is actually taking on the roles of planning the weekly meals and organizing them and making sure everybody's fed. These are beyond just doing your normal household chores as a child and a member of the family. There's also emotional parentification. And this is when the child becomes the parent's confidant. You become their emotional support system or even their therapist. And again, this is a child taking on this role. Both of these are a problem. Both of these cause the child to take on responsibilities that are beyond their years. And like I said, it's of course okay to have your children help with the household chores. They should be responsible for their own stuff, like cleaning their room, putting away their clothes, cleaning up their own dishes, even helping with the house in general. But they should not be putting away their parents' clothes. They should not be planning meals and taking on the responsibility of feeding their siblings. So let's explore some real-life stories that highlight the different ways parentification can manifest. So the example I gave at the beginning, where this young daughter remembers as a youngster sitting with her mom and her mom's crying about life and basically dumping. I've talked about the emotional dumpster before, dumping her worries and her pain and her fears onto her child. Now, being your parent's confidant, yeah, that's a form of parentification. Instead of being allowed to go play and explore and do the things kids do, you are burdened down with your parent's emotional struggles, feeling like if you don't care for your parent, then no one will. And even feeling like they're not capable of doing it themselves. So if I don't help, what will they do? This overburdens a child. Another way is managing the household. Cooking dinner every night, making sure everyone gets their homework done, cleaning the house, maybe even taking care of mom and dad while they're passed out on the floor. Okay, maybe they fell asleep because they were drinking. Maybe they fell asleep because they're exhausted from work. But now the child is putting the parent to bed. Maybe taking care of mom and dad while they're isolating because of a fight they had. And so you're trying to play peacekeeper. And we're going to talk about that again in just a minute. But you're getting the siblings to bed and all tucked in because mom and dad can't handle life. So you practically are raising your younger siblings, realizing so many years later what you missed out on, which was your childhood. Now let's go back to keeping the peace. Some children are made to referee between the parents, playing negotiator between the parents, choosing sides. Well, who's right? This is what I said, and this is what they said, and you're putting the child in the middle. Sometimes the child becomes the protector role of one parent, protecting them from the other parent, becoming very skilled at people-pleasing to avoid conflict, but at the expense of their own emotional development. My own husband used to tell me stories where he was pulled out of his bed in the middle of the night, sound asleep, pulled out to referee his parents' fights. He was made to choose sides, made to determine who was right and who was wrong. And he was only 7 years old. This is an example of parentification, and it's absolutely not okay. Another form of parentification is making our parents look good, getting good grades so that the parent feels good about themselves. There's nothing wrong with getting good grades. I want my child to be motivated to get good grades, but not so I look good. Being the star of a sports team to win their parents' approval. Behaving in public to not embarrass their parents. Do you hear the theme here? This is all about the parents, not about the child. That's what life is like when you're being raised under a covert narcissist. Without knowing it, kids of narcissistic parents are an extension of their parent and their parent's identity. Now, what impact does this have on the kid? In the words of multiple survivors, I was told every time that I just had to understand that this parent, whichever parent it was, mom or dad, that they had a bad upbringing. Never mind that I had a pretty lousy one myself. You see, the kids get told over and over, well, what mom doesn't understand, mom had a rough time, her dad yelled at her a lot. Okay.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Okay, but what about what's going on with that child? Because mom's doing the exact same thing then to that child. The effects of growing up with a covert narcissistic parent ripple through your life. A recurring sentiment that I hear from people is, I didn't have a childhood. From being an employee to solving adult problems, many have shared how they missed out on the carefree years of their youth. I heard this statement multiple times from my own son. He definitely grew up before his age in many ways. He quickly adjusted to being mature and responsible in order to please his dad. Now, he excelled academically and physically through all of his childhood, and he told me years later, Mom, you want to know why I always did so well? I said, sure. He said, because that way Dad would actually be proud of me. You see, in his young adult years, let me change that. You see, in his young childhood life, his central character in his world was his dad. And he had to make sure he was always working hard to please his dad. He was always trying to win his dad's approval. So his whole childhood centered around his dad. Well, in his young adult years, he actually pulled out some of his childhood collection cards and passionately pursued that collection. He told me he never got the opportunity in his childhood, so he was going to make up for it now. Being raised under a covert narcissistic parent leaves emotional scars. In fact, it leaves emotional scar tissue. Even after significant healing, many feel the remnants of their trauma. It never fully disappears. It leaves scar tissue. Words of their parents that's still ringing in your head. You are worthless. You are too sensitive. You're never going to be good enough. My son, who at college, he told me that he hated the sound of his own footsteps when he was walking on the sidewalk. I said, why? That didn't make sense to me, and I was trying to understand. He said because of how many times his dad had berated him for having heavy feet in the house. See, these were some of those words that still rung in his ears. These are the emotional scars that stay in adult children who've been raised by a covert narcissist. You have difficulty trusting both yourself and others. Low self-esteem, lots of self-blame, conditioned to believe that anything bad is your fault. After so much guilt and manipulation from your caregivers, how can you possibly trust other people? You feel instead like you've got to guard yourself from manipulation, because doesn't everybody manipulate when it was so normalized in your own home? Of course you're going to grow up believing that everybody manipulates. Everybody is like this. How about struggles with parenting when you become a parent? Children of covert narcissists start working hard to avoid repeating the patterns that they endured, and many struggle to find what is healthy parenting. You see, the manipulation was normalized, so their perceptions were impacted. In a fear of repeating the pattern, it's actually easy to go the other extreme and overcompensate, overindulge, which doesn't work either. So you struggle to find balance and find healthy boundaries. The last one I'm going to mention is the loss of relationship with the non-toxic family members. This is another impact that covert narcissism has on a family unit. I hear from so many that when they stay in a toxic marriage, once the kids turn 18, they don't come home anymore. I've heard people say, if I had not left this marriage, my kids would never have come around. I would have lost my relationship with my own children. You see, when you have a covert narcissistic parent in your world, and the child pulls out of that as an adult, they lose relationships with their other family members along the way. Kind of collateral damage. Now, while I cannot relate to having a narcissistic parent myself, I can relate in that I watched my children go through this. I watched the struggles, the pain, the burdens they carried, and the frustrations. And now I watch and participate in life with them as they heal, learn, grow, and move forward in their own relationships. It is so incredibly painful to have that front row seat in their world. But I am privileged and honored and blessed to be there and be that part in their life. The pain they carry is real, but they can turn it into something beautiful in their world. Take those lessons that you learned from your childhood when you dealt with a covert narcissistic parent and turn them into gems of wisdom and understanding. Together, we can make this world a better place, one step at a time. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. You have been listening to the Covert Narcissism Podcast. If you are struggling with covert narcissism in your life, I help people to heal from covert narcissistic abuse. If you are struggling with the isolation, the self-doubt, and the obsessive thinking, then this is the program for you. I offer both group and individual options. This is live, personalized coaching that is specific to covert narcissism. Reach out to me anytime. You can find me at my website, covertnarcissism.com. I'm not a therapist and you are not a victim. I am a coach and you are a survivor. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. The information provided by Renee Swanson and the Covert Narcissism Podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes and not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. It does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support an allegation or a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of the material and information provided.